First order of business is a roll call to determine who is present and who is on the board and not present. Barb, would you take the roll call, please?
Yes, Aaron Williams.
Present.
Richard Bradley,
Present.
Michael Brown. Hearing no response is absent. April Ford Griffin,
Present.
Tammy Holland. Hearing no response is absent. Tracy Johnson
Present.
and our chairman, Jim Dwyer.
Present.
Thank you.
So I count 5 members present, and that constitutes a quorum. So we can proceed with the business of the day. I have only a couple of brief comments. First of all, welcome to the new members of this board, and to anyone who has not participated previously as a presenter or an observer, welcome to you as well. As I mentioned, this is our 5th year of meeting and reviewing presentations and then adopting measures to support or to question or to do whatever what seems to be appropriate with respect to requests for funding under the economic development tax. The procedure that we have used in past years, which I would propose to use again today, is that following each presentation, the board members will have an opportunity to pose questions. And once all questions and answers have occurred, we will then conduct a vote on that particular request. And then we'll proceed through the agenda in that manner. Any questions about that? Okay, the next order of business then is consideration to appoint or reappoint the chairman. So I will ask if there are any nominations to succeed me as chair of this committee, of this board.
Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate you to continue to be the chair of this board.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on that? I will call the question. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you for that. The next order of business is approval of the minutes of the meeting held approximately a year ago on May 5th, 2022. I'll ask first whether there are any comments or corrections or observations about those minutes. I have 3 comments, Barb.
Okay.
The first, if you go to the last page of the minutes and go down 1, 2, 3, 4 to the 5th paragraph, which begins with the words Mr. Bradley added.
Okay, I'm with you.
Me? All right, second line, about 5 words in, there's it reads had been placed Don, and there's an extra space after place, so the D belongs with the place.
Got it.
Okay, good. Minor, but I figure we might as well get it right.
Yes.
And then I believe that it would be appropriate to note the time of adjournment. I don't know if you can reconstruct that from a year ago, but certainly going forward, we should note that. And if you can find a note that would enable you to add a time of adjournment for last year, that would be helpful. And then I believe it would be appropriate for you to identify yourself as the person taking the minutes.
I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, if you wanted another place as well, but it says at 10:59 PM, the board entertained a motion to adjourn from Mr. Petty and seconded by Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. Another close reader, and you caught something that I missed. All right, that's good. No, I don't think we need it twice.
That should actually say 10:59 AM, because I'm fairly certain we didn't meet till 10:59 PM.
It wasn't.
All right, so this is good. We got 3 people engaged in reviewing the minutes. I think that may be a world record.
It was a very long meeting.
Yes, okay. So are there any, now we've got 3 corrections. Are there any other comments or edits?
I would
Yeah.
just say, since you were addressing some typos in the second line of the very first paragraph, that third word where it says sailed, it should be called. So just,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it so that I can correct it.
agenda item number 1,
Uh-huh.
the first paragraph, the second sentence, the third word.
The agenda and documents referred to herein are attached to these minutes.
No,
No.
the second, maybe yours may be, I'm not sure.
Oh, I
if you have
printed
the
it,
same
okay.
Copy, but after the first sentence ends with City of St. Louis. Was.
Oh, I see.
Was,
I
okay,
see.
Mm.
Thank you very much.
no problem.
Okay, any other comments? Then I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
So
May I have-
moved.
Thank you. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Thank you. Any additional comments? I will call the question. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The motion carries. The minutes for the meeting of May 5th, 2022 are approved as amended. We're ready now to go into the presentations, and I just want to make sure that the order of presentation is acceptable to everyone. Nancy, I think you mentioned something about maybe having to rearrange the agenda.
It's not a rearranging. There is a reference to the SLDC folks who are not actually going to be here today because their issue is related, but John Rowe and Noel Pfeffer can speak to that what it is. Like that agenda meeting, the item should actually be removed
All right, terrific.
from the
Thank you.
agenda.
Other than that, no other reordering or of the agenda, correct?
Correct.
Which
All right.
item is being removed? I'm sorry.
B as in boy, C as
C.
in cat.
Okay.
Okay, then we can.
Isn't B me?
No, B subparagraph C, Don.
C, paragraph C.
You're okay. We-
Yes,
All right,
B is you,
thanks,
yes,
thanks.
B is you, but C is not.
Okay.
All right. Okay, Nancy, the floor is yours.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. With this, the proposal, what I'm bringing forward is that each year a specific amount of money, 60% of the EcoDevo sales tax is allocated to the transit and funds, and they usually remain in the fund for future appropriations. And at this time, what we're asking is for the $13,980,000 that is expected to be for fiscal year 24 to be moved into the kept for that fund for future purposes. And right now, the status of the use of the funds is that we are continuing to accumulate money in that fund, and simultaneously, there was a consultant hired from whose name is AECOM to study needs and alignment and the route analysis for north side, south side, which is ongoing. And at the same time, Metro, Bi-State / Metrolink has hired their own specific project manager to take a look at all of this as well. But we're asking that we're not expending the funds at this time. We're just rolling them over into the transit to continue to grow that fund. With this additional 13 million, it will come to be $80,593,438. And we're hopeful that at some point, as we apply to, and if the process goes forward to do a north side, south side line, we would be using these funds to help fund that and or possibly as a match if we get federal funding, if a match is needed from the federal government. So I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Questions from the board? Is it little I, double I, environmental assessment? Is that something you want to address?
The environmental assessment, when we were doing this, we thought we would be ready to do that. We're not at this point. So right now we want to just roll the money back over into the fund specifically to leave. Once ECOM does their part, we will take a look at what the next level of needs will be for that.
Thank you. Then I'll ask once again if there are any questions from members of the board for Nancy. May I then have a motion on whether to recommend approval of this request?
So moved.
Is that Youssef?
Yes.
Right,
Hey,
but-
Jim.
All right, good.
Is the
Sorry.
director a voting member? I just
No.
need to be clear.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, he's not.
I
That's what I thought.
apologize. Thanks for correcting me.
Thanks for being ready to act. So may I have a motion from?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Good, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? I will call the question. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Oh, could
Aye.
we have a roll vote on that, Chair? I'll be happy to call the roll for you.
Okay, certainly, we can do that.
Okay. Aaron Williams, was that a aye? Okay, I can see you. Okay. President Bradley,
Aye.
Michael Brown is absent. April Ford Griffin,
Aye.
Tammy Holland is absent. Tracy Johnson, okay, and Chairman Dwyer.
Aye.
Very good.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries. We will move now to item B, neighborhood revitalization.
Right.
Mr.
Thank you, Chair Dwyer. Can I share my screen because I've got just a single slide to go through to present our budget and just share with the committee. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes,
Wonderful. So first of all, as a just preliminary comment, I think it's important to emphasize that everything that we're talking about under our economic development sales tax budget is in line and really driven by the city's economic justice action plan. And the economic justice action plan was actually funded with FY22 economic development sales tax revenues. And so I think it's a really important just through line to follow with these funds is that they funded the drafting and creation of the city's economic justice action plan. And now we're following that action plan and allocating funds. And the action plan essentially has three pillars, which starts with economic empowerment, recognizing that developing our city starts with people and that it's not enough to transform the built environment. We need to invest in youth, in job training, workforce development, et cetera. The second strategic prong of the economic justice action plan is equitable and community-driven development. And that's really about knitting our city together with infrastructure, with transit, with commercial corridors. And again, a place where the economic development sales tax is critical with funding transit to long-term transcend the north-south divide in our city. And then the final prong of the Economic Justice Action Plan is neighborhood transformation, which involves affordable housing and transforming our city's vacant land from a liability into an asset. And this is really where CDA's focus is, the Community Development Administration, which serves as a clearinghouse for federal funds for the city, and administers ARPA funds, HUD funds, and this economic development sales tax budget, which I'll talk through now. So first of all, I want to provide an update regarding the implementation of last year's economic development sales tax budget, and then I'll talk about our proposed budget for the coming year. Last year, we requested for the first time a CDA public information officer. That PIO has been hired, and they are doing great work. CDA is required to go through a whole lot of citizen participation, public hearings, public notices, getting out into the community. So our PIO is hard at work on that, as well as on just making our RFPs and our NOFAs and all our funding cycle materials a little more accessible, because we're really committed to ensuring that these funds are accessible to grassroots organizations. The second item was LRA-owned historic building stabilization. And we did enter into, or we are entering into a contract with LRA that has already been approved at ENA and is in the execution process for the stabilization of Sarah Luke Cafe and Chuck Berry House. And once that contract is executed, LRA will be releasing RFPs to award those funds to applying developers, and also to, because those properties are currently in LRA's inventory, to transfer and sell those properties as well. So that is moving forward. The next item from last year was a $500,000 allocation for a vacancy strategy. And we did hold an RFP and select the Vacancy Collaborative to conduct that strategy. That scope of work will involve three prongs. The first is facilitating a series of interdepartmental community coordination meetings, as well as community engagement meetings that brings together the diverse set of stakeholders, ranging from LRA to the planning department, to the building division, to the assessor's office, to the collector of revenues office, to MSD, to many more. And so that's a really important prong of that work. The second prong of that vacancy strategy scope of work is data analysis, and really truthing and digging into our data on vacant buildings and vacant lots, and critically using that data to build out vacancy prioritization indices that help us prioritize how we allocate scarce resources to demolish vacant buildings, to stabilize vacant buildings, and to maintain our vacant lots. The third prong of the strategy is a policy and legal analysis that involves analyzing opportunities ranging from the Residential Renovation Loan Commission, which was authorized at the state level, to how we expand and improve the Proposition Neighborhood Stabilization Program, to how we explore community land trusts in the city, and many others that we haven't contemplated to date. But it's that policy legal prong of the work. And that's a 2-year contract that's going to be running essentially through 2025, and really excited to kick that process off. And then the next item is neighborhood plan implementation grants. So this, I think it's really important to emphasize, was the original kind of guiding intent of the legislation. What was included as Exhibit C in Ordinance 70435 was this proposal for neighborhood plan implementation grants, which would allow the city of St. Louis has so many plans and provide some money to actually implement them and fund them. This is on hold temporarily because CDA currently has a $20.25 million notice of funding availability out of ARPA funds. And so we want to wait to see what applications come into that, what we can fund with these $20 million in ARPA funds, and then come back with this more flexible economic development sales tax funding to fill in those gaps and understand, once we understand what can and can't be funded a little bit better. So we're holding on that both until we finish awarding our neighborhood transformation grants later this year, and also as there are a variety of planning processes currently in the works, and we want to have those plans ready to go and complete so that we can then use this funding for implementation. And at the end of the day, $950,000 doesn't get you all that far, which is why we are proposing to reappropriate those funds next year, in addition to another $1 million for a total $2 million in neighborhood plan implementation grants for next year. And then finally, there was last year a $50,000 community planning grants item. The truth is that CDA does not have the expertise or the capacity to drive this work. And you'll see as Don goes through the planning budget that PDA is really leading this work and doing great work supporting neighborhood planning efforts. And so it doesn't really make sense to duplicate those efforts. We've held on that 50,000 and are not requesting the reappropriation of those funds in FY24. So shifting over to FY24, we are once again requesting funding for a public information officer. That initial FY23 figure was an estimate. The real salary, the real personnel cost is detailed there. We are also requesting funding for data analysis and graphic design services to continue the work of strategically allocating our resources and also making our RFPs and our NOFAs more accessible. And then we are also requesting, the same way we are working currently to collaborate with a diverse array of city departments on a vacancy strategy, we're requesting $500,000 this year to work with SLDC, to work with Slate and various other stakeholders across the city on a workforce development strategy. And then finally, we are requesting the $2 million I alluded to earlier in neighborhood plan implementation grants. And that's it from CDA. Happy to answer any questions.
Before I ask the board if there are questions, I want to compliment you on the presentation, especially reviewing the history and what was requested in prior years and what has been accomplished with those funds. That is particularly helpful. So thank you for that. I will ask if there are questions from any members of the board regarding Mr. Pfeffer's presentation and request.
Mr. Chair, I just would like to ask Mr. Pfeffer one question, if that's all right.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Director, question. So your PIO, is that Tom Nagel?
That's right. He's wonderful.
Yeah, I just want to make this comment that Tom is doing an outstanding job. I have seen his work and very impressed by it. So fabulous job there. Thank you.
We're lucky to have him, and I don't want to embarrass him, but I do want to say that his parents met at CDA, and so he's come home to CDA, and we're very, very happy to have him.
Additional questions or comments from board members?
I don't have any questions, but I did want to second Chairman Dwyer's statement about the appreciation for sharing the progress of previous funding. As a person new to this board, with the first voting items, I was sort of hesitant to ask that information because I didn't know if it was common practice. But now that I see you have provided that information, I think it is a standard to uphold with all of the other presenters. So thank you for, I guess, giving me the comfort to ask for that going further.
No problem.
Good. Any additional questions or comments? And I would like to confirm that the total request is $2,330,000. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. The total request is $2,700,000 and one moment. Let me do some quick math here. The total request is $2,716,111.
That's fairly precise. Thank you for that. I see where the 111 came from. All right. If there are no additional questions or comments, I will call for a motion on the request for funding in the aggregate amount of $2,716,111. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Previous roll.
Thank you for that. Barb?
Okay, any objection to previous roll? Hearing none, this motion will pass unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move now to Don Rowe and his presentation.
Good morning, everybody. congratulations to the chairman for your reelection. Like you, I've been here since the beginning. And as Noel spent and reminded, we reminded folks that he was instrumental in drafting the legislation that went before the voters that did two things in essence: establish this committee for guidance, and in essence, also put some things into a sales tax that was dedicated to certain purposes. And for the voters to vote in a sales tax for dedicated certain purposes, as we're doing here, is pretty transformational for our city. I just came back from, and also some members of my staff, last night from the National Planning Conference in Philadelphia. And one item, of course, is in older cities, doing things for transit and having money for that transit to be our local share, as what Nancy talked about in the first item, is really important for us to have the seat at the table to get those funding. When Noel was talking, he talked about some of the things that are from us, from the federal government, and alluded that there are restrictions and requirements for those. And that can get challenging at times, and noted that the flexibility of this money to do the purposes what the voters wanted is a very helpful thing, with a little less bureaucracy in the process for that. So that's great. The two items that you see for me to talk about is under neighborhood planning and strategic planning update. And one of the things I will tell you that my colleagues are around the country are jealous about is having this tax that we're having on. You can see our two major budget lines are administration and contractual services, a tax that employs planners in the Planning and Urban Design Agency, City Agency 141. That's great. What we've been faced with is COVID interrupted a number of things and going out in the field, but we've done great work in making researching best practices around the country, coming up with an overall framework of how neighborhood plans are being done. We're doing some beta testing of that with a couple community driven plans that we're assisting with, particularly in Project Connect, which is around NGA, and SLDC is very much a partner in doing that. Staffing has been a dilemma. We are yet to be fully staffed. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge that's ongoing now, which we'll see how successful we are between now and the start of the new budget year, and using our current funding for that. Jonathan was certainly at the national conference. He is now also the director, been promoted to being the city executive overseeing neighborhood planning. He also happens to be the chair of the Missouri chapter of the American Planning Association. So he was in Philadelphia recruiting and evangelizing about what we're needing. That's very important. But boy, getting planners are a tough row. Hiring is a tough row. Our asterisk that we also have, because we've been delayed, allocation of ARPA money, where we will also apply and get some planners to help speed up this overall process. So we're pleased that they're out there working. We're pleased that we've been out to neighborhoods and talked about what's coming. We're pleased about this beta testing. We're just eager to be able to turn the switch a little higher up with getting more people recruited onto staff. Neighborhood planning will be adopted under local and state law for all 79 neighborhoods as we progress through this funding. Complementary to that is that we also have a plan called the Strategic Land Use Plan, which I mentioned that I'll update. It is authorized under state law, under comprehensive planning. The city was very lax in not doing this for a while. We've had one before us. We're now in the process of updating it. The neighborhood plans will be part of those. And that's one of the things that we're using the current year's consulting money for a contract we're going through the process of doing now. Important, and it's important is as we mentioned about SLDC, some of the items that get presented from SLDC and are now programs to do in the community, we're using this current consulting effort we're going to do to try to integrate those so we adopt them also under state planning law. And that's an important thing. So we have an RFP out using EcoDevo funds from this year for doing that. We have some anticipation that we want to make some even more refinements next year that document these things and engage them into being embedded in the city's planning and regulatory aspect of things. So there are a number of things that come under our contractual services related to professionals helping us with the strategic land use plan and other topics that relate to land use like zoning. And the work that SODC does comes through us through our budget process in the EcoDevo, or some of it does, for them to perform contractual services related to the neighborhood planning implementation. And that's part of our detail. So the two things are those big, broad stuff that we have internal staff. We're hiring, we have programs, but we're not as ramped up as we like to be. And the ongoing consulting services are something we're doing this year, propose to do next year, and are also looking at other sources to help embellish us and what level that we do that, both from ARPA funds and others. So I'll leave it at that as a general comment.
Sorry, I was muted. Don, can you summarize in dollar amounts, your request?
Yeah, as I noted, I think what you saw, you didn't get an updated number. There's two numbers from 23 of 1.1 million for admin and contractual services, about 1.9 million. We can proceed with those as a general request. And as I said, as we're exploring our rollover and other sources for doing some more next year, we'll be participating in the rest of the budget process for both complementary things to what we're doing here.
All right, so if the numbers that I'm looking at are accurate, what you're requesting is approval of a request for $3,140,507.
Yes.
Okay.
And we may be, as I say, for the overall picture, engaged in some other activities with other budget sources related to our neighborhood planning initiative that is part of EcoDevo.
All right, thank you for that. Questions or comments from board members? No questions? You're letting Don off that easily? Okay.
I was curious about the admin positions. Am I correct in my assumption that would become a recurring expense?
Yeah, and admin is a topic. It's not the people that we're hiring are professional planners, but it's so to cut to the short, that line item is for city civil service staff hired through the city budget process, and the majority of them are planners.
Does that answer your question?
It does, and that it will be a recurring expense.
Yes, and it's a recurring thing, because I should say, we have a program. The other thing that I should mention is important in this is the City Planning Commission, which Rich Bradley is a member of, guides us to one, are we doing things in the best practices? They question us. What have we learned at these past conferences? And we present to them as how we go about doing the neighborhood planning, and they bless that. But it will take several years to complete all 79 neighborhoods. Therefore, yes, we're hiring staff to participate in that, and that they would be civil service staff.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions or comments? I have one, Don, and that is, what can you tell the board the status of your priority list of neighborhoods that will be addressed first and second and third, et cetera, and where you are on that list?
Yeah, a good point. So as many of us will mention, we like to make sure we're coordinating with things that are reflective of disparities in years past. So one, the opera money and its allocation to qualified census tracts is very important and part of the rubric of what we're thinking about. The materials that SODC has been preparing for having economic justice in the city is another aspect of that. So with that, and knowing that there are some neighborhoods that have resources that might have done some planning in the past, we take to the planning commission, we take to the planning commission a grouping of neighborhood plans to be done in the first tranche, and then we'll go on to other tranches. So we have a developed by staff presentation that we went to the planning commission, that we put the 79 neighborhoods in the city into, I think it's 29 clusters. So some of the neighborhoods will be working on as more than one neighborhood in one effort, meaning a signed planner and the consulting services to go along with that. So we have a list of those that we're working from. But first up in that right now is this interrelationship with SODC that they are following. We have staff with them, but SODC is very much working on for us to adopt through the planning commission, following all the processes we set up, plans for the 6 neighborhoods that are around the NGA to be adopted this coming fall. So that's the immediacy. We're participating very much in that, having a learning curve from that. We have another beta test that's going on in the West End with the St. Louis Community Foundation that's funding that. And we finished up one in the North Central neighborhood. So those are there. As we hire staff, we have the list from the Planning Commission of the proposed areas where we're next going to. We won't go to all of them at once because we're moving staff in, but I will say from that list, near the top candidates of those are the ones, the cluster that includes Baden, one that includes the Walnut Park neighborhoods, particularly that's in the Economic Justice Action Plan, and then also Fairgrounds and College Hill would be among the early comers.
Thank you. It's interesting to me that you focused on the 6 neighborhoods around the NGA. That makes a lot of sense to me. I wonder, and I'm not looking for an answer, I'm just presenting a thought. I'm wondering whether you could also build upon independent initiatives such as Great Rivers Greenways initiative and the transit effort that was alluded to in the first presentation today, and focus priorities based on other compatible initiatives that would create synergies.
So ding, ding, ding. One thing I want to say is this is of tremendous importance for an overall context to think about. It's been 21 years since April Ford Griffin, a young new alderperson, came and asked for us to do a plan for the place that she was just elected to, the 5th Ward at the time. And I said, not going to do a plan for the neighborhood. And what we're going to do a plan for is all the neighborhoods of the 5th Ward. And we did that. And for 5 neighborhoods in the 5th Ward at the time, there are standing 5-year-old plans. They are all on the record, but they're going to be replaced by the plans from Project Connect. So here we are 20 years later, reflecting on the fact that there was a very big activity that's now coming there. 20 some odd years ago, for the area north of Cass, it was anticipated that should be reserved in the St. Louis Place plan for something big to happen. Wasn't quite envisioned to be as big as 100 acres, but 50 plus. Here we have that catalytic development is arriving there. The neighborhood is working on a plan for how to make that be what the neighborhood needs to be going forward. It's exciting as all heck out. It builds on that neighborhood plan, the new one's coming, and that's pretty damn exciting. Great Rivers Greenway and the transit stuff, PDA gets involved with in all sorts of ways. One of my smiles, because I get to do that. And Rich Bradley is also very much involved in that. And of course, the formation of the Beltline, the Beltline is in Atlanta that circles the city and connects neighborhoods. The Brick Line, which is the current big proposal from GRG, goes east-west, north-south, and particularly goes through the Jeff Vanderloo neighborhood and some of the neighborhoods around NGA. And yes, they're coordinated.
Good, thank you. We're going to deduct some time from your next year's presentation.
You've known me for a long time, Jim, and you still dared to ask a question.
Okay, I'll learn. Okay, if there is no further discussion or no further questions on Don's presentation, I will call for a motion on his request.
I do have one more question. It's just a confirming question.
Yes,
Is my understanding correct that the neighborhood planning process will happen simultaneously with the SLUP update and potentially comp plan revision?
It's a dance card. So yeah, we're all on the dance floor at the same time. They interact a little bit, but that's all in a choreographed way. Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
What are the two plans you asked, Mr. Williams? Will planning process happen simultaneously with what?
Updated St. Louis land use plan and then the St. Louis comprehensive plan.
Oh, thank you.
And to be a little further, there are different terms for a very similar thing in the planning world.
And there's one more which CDA will be, which is our HUD required 2025 to 2029 consolidated plan.
The ones that Aaron's are talking to relate to land use law. Yes. And then Noel is part of implementation with federal funding, and they have to all be in sync.
okay, that's encouraging. Synchronicity. All right. I asked for a motion. May I have one?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Is there a
Previous
second?
roll.
Thank you. Barb?
Okay, any objection to the previous roll? Hearing none, that motion will pass unanimously.
Thank you. Now, we'll move now to item C, workforce development. Ms. McGowan?
Thank you so much. Good morning. I'm Frederica McGlown, the Executive Director of Slate. It's an honor and a privilege to come before you today to present Slate's fiscal year budget for fiscal year 24 EcoDevo Fund. Our proposed budget request is in the amount of $3,487,788. And I wanted to take a brief moment to highlight some of our agency's key asks in the upcoming fiscal year's budget. This short presentation will highlight about 3.28 million of those needs. Our breakdown is as follows. This year, the previous fiscal year, we were looking at about $698,000 in salaries and fringes, and this year there would be an increase in that amount to $1,180,000. So our current EcoDevo Fund budget supports 8 positions within the agency. And through our fiscal year 24 budget, we are requesting an additional 3 positions to be added to our table of organization. As the demands for employment and training increase within the city and the agency, we need to provide an adequate amount of staff to support those needs. And those 3 additional positions we are looking to hire is a program manager responsible for oversight of the programs that we administer through the agency, a fiscal officer, and a public information officer. And so that is along the lines of salary and fringes that we are coming to you to request today. That second category we're looking at is grant obligations. For fiscal year 23, Our request was $781,900. And this year, for the upcoming fiscal year, we're looking at about $1.1 million. Our current fiscal year 23 EcoDevo budget for grant obligations consisted of funds to support the current education, employment, and training programs the agency provides. The amount we are now requesting, which I mentioned to you all, is the $1,102,531.25. The agency's primary source of funding is federal, state, and local grant opportunities. Therefore, when applying for many of those opportunities, it is a requirement for the agency to provide a percentage of match funding. Our agency has been able to apply for numerous grant opportunities this year and has done so because of the increasing need to get individuals skilled up and trained up post-COVID and get them back to work. And it is our plan to apply for several more within the new fiscal year. Therefore, this increase will support this. Also budgeted within this amount is the cost to cover WIOA consultant services to ensure programmatic and fiscal compliance of our largest grant, which is our Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, provided to us by the United States Department of Labor by way of the Office of Workforce Development. This amount also includes approximately $600,000 that's set aside for litigation purposes, in which we plan to roll forward into the new fiscal year. The amount also provides funds that support a lapse between being awarded grants to ensure that programs continue to run efficiently and the community continues to receive the services they need until we are provided new awards. Our final ask for you is for facilities and grounds. Last year, we came to you and asked for $1 million for facilities and grounds, and we are asking for a $1 million request again in an effort to relocate into the community with regard to our city's goals of creating economic empowerment centers throughout the city with a primary focus on North St. Louis. After receiving those funds last year, we encountered a roadblock that needed to be resolved. It was vital that the agency resolve their 2019 United States Department of Labor audit in an effort for us to continue receiving federal funding to provide employment and training services to the community. Therefore, those funds went towards resolving those findings. And we are now in good standing with both DOL and the Office of Workforce Development. Therefore, I come before you today requesting $1 million to support Slate's effort once again to relocate within the community to ensure we meet the community where they are to get them the services they need to be successful. Since I've last presented to you, we are co-located several times a month at SLDC's Economic Empowerment Center at Sumner High School and the Murphy Park Community Center once a week through a partnership with Urban Strategies to provide services to individuals within those communities. It is Slate's goal to partner with St. Louis Public Schools and St. Louis Community College, along with the Comptroller's Office, to determine what our options are to provide a state-of-the-art job training facility for clients. This center will be a one-stop job center to meet clients' needs. It will eliminate many of the barriers and challenges that clients are presented with when accessing our current location, such as parking when attending job fairs and seeking other Slate services, especially when there are major events in downtown St. Louis. Our current location does not allow for us to provide access to on-site training opportunities and presents the major challenge of operating a high school inside of a city government building or office space. This new facility will also house our agency's young adult division and will serve as the home for our WIOA youth program, youth build program, summer youth employment program, jobs league program, and any other youth programs we obtain within the future. This new facility will provide our young people with a safe space to gain their high school equivalency, earn industry recognized credentials, and explore careers and employment opportunities while also partaking in recreational activities to keep them safe and ensure their holistic success. We would like to equip them with a library, gymnasium to engage in sports, an auditorium for youth to go into creative production, and also a studio for youth who are interested in pursuing music. In conclusion, my ask to you is that you approve our budget as presented to you today so that our organization can continue to move forward in providing educational, employment, and training opportunities for those of our great city. And again, that total amount that Slate is requesting from you for fiscal year 24 is $3,487,788. Any question?
Thank you for that comprehensive presentation. I have a procedural question. I'm
Mhm.
looking at the budget that was presented in anticipation of this meeting, and it appears to me that there is a second component that is integrated into the workforce development category, and that has to do with the Department of Human Services. And so I'm assuming, one, that there is a representative of the Department of Human Services who will testify. And number two, unless you correct me, I'm going to assume that the dollar amount that is attributable to that component is included in the $3,487,000. No, it is not.
No.
So it's a separate matter. So therefore, I should call for a separate vote on your request in the amount of $3,487,788, correct?
That is correct, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. All right, then the next order of business would be to ask whether there are questions or comments from board members.
Yes, I do have a question about the staff funding. So you're requesting funding for 8 positions with 3 of them being added, correct?
So I currently have 8 positions, and so I'm asking for an additional 3, Mr. Williams. I'm sorry if that wasn't
And
clear.
is the funding request for the additional 3 or for all 11 of the positions?
So it would be all 11 because the 8 would be a continuation from the ones that we had last year in total, plus the additional 3.
Okay, would you mind sharing what was the budget for the existing 8 positions? I'm
The
just trying to do
existing-
the math.
The existing 8 positions. If you give me
It doesn't have to be exact either. Roundabout is fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think it was about 689,000. I had it just pulled up a second ago. Last year, $698,763.
Okay. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Hearing none, I will ask whether there is a motion request.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Any further discussion? I will call the question.
Would you like me to call the roll, Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, Aaron
Well,
Williams.
I
I'm
don't know
sorry.
I don't know that that's necessary unless, it depends on whether Rich wants to make a motion for the previous.
Previous roll.
Previous row.
Okay,
And any objection to previous roll? Hearing none, that motion will pass unanimously.
Thank you all.
that saved us a couple of minutes. All right, then the next item for consideration is item B under workforce development. And it says on my agenda that Valerie Russell is going to present for the Department of Human Services. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's what the agenda says, but the director, Eustace Scoggin, is going to join us because Valerie got called to another meeting that we did not anticipate. So he's on.
Good.
Here he comes.
Good morning, everyone. My time will be brief so as to make up for any other more in detail presentations. We have not utilized in full the resources that were allocated from FY23. We have $888,000 and some change and $473 that remain. We like to roll that over. And with the request of $926,408 for the FY24 to be able to RFP out. The Department of Human Services has desired to RFP these resources out for youth empowerment, but subject to some staffing shortages, have not been able to achieve that as an objective. And so we would like to do that. We are in consultation with the Office on Youth and Family, Lakeisha Robinson, in regards to the specific activities and objectives that would be put forward in that RFP. And we look forward to the consideration of this body to support those efforts for a future RFP.
Thank you, Youssef. Well, any questions from the board? Well, then I'm going to ask you, Youssef, if you could explain, I think you hit upon it, but if you could just go a shade deeper on the fact that there is a substantial sum that you're rolling over because you were unable to expend it in the previous fiscal year. Can you just help us understand that?
Yes, the intention of those resources were to provide youth empowerment activities, but due to the inability to issue an RFP. So just as an overall contextual component, the Department of Human Services did receive approximately $60 million in ARPA funds to deploy, which were heavily needed to address some of the critical housing instability needs. Yet we have some significant challenges in staffing over this period of time. To date, we have over 23 in staffing vacancies, many of which are in the various spaces and places that would allow for us to execute on the issuance of that RFP, and therefore also the monitoring of any projects that might have been selected and deployed. And so as a result, that is why those dollars remain to be carried over. We do identify the need for said activities for youth empowerment. We have had various discussions, and we have had discussions with personnel department relative to staffing up so that we do not run into the same roadblock this coming year. Our goal is in the next quarter to issue the RFP so that those carryover funds, if allowed, as well as the new dollars, are able to be deployed and support youth empowerment here in our community.
Good. That's important, I think, for us to know that the funds can be deployed, or the prospect is strong that they can be deployed.
Absolutely.
The coming FY.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you for that. I'll ask once again if there are questions or comments from members of the board. Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion on the request.
So moved.
Thank
Previous
you.
roll.
Okay, I hear a call for previous role. Did we have a second?
Not yet.
Oh,
May I have-
sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
Previous
Thank-
role.
There we go. Thank you.
And is there any objection to the use of previous role? Hearing none, this motion will pass unanimously.
And then
Thank
we will,
you.
thank you all. And then we'll move now to the final item on the agenda, the public safety category. Ms. Russell.
Can I just say one thing before we start this? And Rich Bradley might want to add in. Previously, we've used this money for a variety of things in public safety. But this year, if you look at the minutes, we talked about paying for the PSAP and putting some money in towards that fund. We are still trying to create the PSAP, but we think that this is something that we could resolve this particular issue that Sarah is going to talk about, and so is Chief Coyle. So that's why we only have one item under public safety this time, in case someone looks and sees we used to try to fund 2 or 3 different things. We're actually trying to accomplish one thing in the next year or so. So maybe
So I'll just add a couple of comments on top of Nancy's. That's a
Yeah.
great summary. And in the past, we have asked for funding for the PSAP, and just so everyone knows, real quick snapshot, of that. That's the public safety answering point. We currently have a little over $21 million for a $43 million facility. We are working on the preliminary feasibility study. And once that is completed, we would move into engineering design. There are some asks out there in different places to close the funding gap, as Nancy indicated. And the item that Commissioner Russell is going to talk about, I think you will find very interesting because the need is definitely there. And this morning's weather activity justified just exactly how bad we need this. So I will turn it over to Sarah, and you can add on to that.
Sure, thank you. So I see two different pieces that do apply to SEMA. The first being the mass notification system for $100,000 on the list. That is an ongoing project and one that is also incredibly valuable. As I'll get to when we talk about the outdoor warning siren system, it's very important that we have redundant and layered communication systems as we make as much of an effort as we can to reach as many people as possible when we're under threats from various hazards, be that natural hazards or man-made hazards that impact the city. So that first 100,000 that is noted on the sheet that I'm looking at for the budget wise is relative to the Notify STL mass notification system. That is an internal and external system that we have had in place for just over 4 years now, I believe. And we are still working on expanding that on the internal side to be able to be used by different city departments for different functions, as well as being able to notify city employees more easily. And again, having that layered approach to reach out to our internal employee groups. So just real briefly on that piece. And then I can go, if you'd like, right into the siren portion as well. So our siren system is a system of outdoor warning sirens that is in place across the city. We have 60 siren locations that have been in place since 1999. That was when the current system was installed, which makes it about 23 going on 24 years old, which is very old for a system such as that. I've had some conversations with the manufacturer, and their statement to me was that a typical usable lifespan for this siren system is 15 years when it is very well maintained. Our system is very old and it absolutely is in need of replacement. So that is what I am here to talk to you about today. Approximately, 50 on a good sunny blue sky day, about 50% of the sirens do not have a full functionality. So each siren, we have a couple of different models for a number of speakers that are in place across the city. Some have 6, 7, 8, or 9 speakers. So on any given day, many of our sirens do not have all of their speakers functioning. Some may have, very few, and some may have more. So that is one concern. We know that some are becoming less predictable with how they function. So that is, of course, a very big concern when we're talking about making these critical alerts to our residents. Just a little bit of explanation. The typical installation for a siren, the siren and the speaker and driver assembly is at the top of the pole. And then there is a cabinet farther down, which holds batteries and a solar panel, in addition to a radio card. The solar panel charges the batteries. The batteries typically are replaced every 3 years. the life of the batteries is about 3 years as well. So we can tell that they're starting to work a little bit harder to hold a charge. But we've had a pretty good system with the street department assisting us to go and replace those batteries on a 3-year rotation. And the bulk of the budget that we have within the SEMA budget directly from the city goes to pay for those batteries. The street department does do minimal maintenance on these, so they can check to see if the batteries are dead. They can replace the batteries. There is a diagnostic button up in the cabinet that you can press to check the functionality of the siren, and it should light up and tell you how many of the speakers on that post are functioning. That is something that they have done in the past for us. We don't have the capacity or we don't have the siren technician position any longer to be able to complete that work ourselves. In addition, there is one repeater for this system. So it's a radio functional system. So whenever we activate the sirens, either from the SEMA office here on Olive or at the fire alarm office up on Jefferson, it sends out a radio signal to the repeater, which is on top of the Channel 30 tower just north of downtown. And then that repeater broadcasts to all of the individual 60 siren locations. So that is a critical piece of the system, and it has no redundancy. If for some reason that loses power, the backup doesn't work, we can't activate the siren system. So that is a critical failure point for us, which we hope to address with a new system and have a redundancy with 2 repeaters to more easily and more effectively reach the entire city. The justification, of course, as was mentioned, in this past week alone, we have used many of our mass notification tools a number of times. Fortunately, we haven't used the siren a bunch. We did test the system on Monday, as we try to do every first Monday of the month at 11 a.m. But with the other states around us and the impacts that we've seen from tornadoes, both Friday as well as last night and early this morning, this is absolutely a hazard that we have to consider. And this system is critical to that. It is something that many people in the city have been accustomed to providing them with a layer of safety and security when these hazards threaten us. And one thing that has changed in the past number of years, the National Weather Service has created a tiered kind of designation for their severe thunderstorm warnings. So warnings are observed severe thunderstorms, and this adds an additional layer to that. So the pertinent one to this conversation is the highest level, which is called a destructive severe thunderstorm warning. And that is a severe thunderstorm that has the capability and the observed impact of 80-mile-an-hour or greater winds. The damage created by these storms is very similar to tornadoes. So for that reason, we have added that as another opportunity where we will activate the siren system. So it's no longer just tornado warnings. It is also for those warnings that are severe thunderstorm warnings that are tagged destructive. And whenever they do make that designation, that is something that they have high confidence in from the Weather Service. And that type of warning actually has been an actuality 100% of the time, whereas tornado warnings are significantly less than 100% of the time. So that's just a way that we're changing. We're changing the way that we use our technology. We're changing the ways that we're able to alert the residents. So I did want to mention that. The cost that we're estimating at this point for the replacement of this system total is about $5 million. it has gone up significantly since the last system was purchased in 1999. And we're looking at a couple of different phases to accomplish this. The first phase being to put out an RFQ to get a study done. Fortunately for many of you on this call today, development in the city has changed quite a bit. The landscape and different parts of the city look much differently than they did in 1998 or 1999 when our current system was spec'd out and put in place. So we want to make sure that we're still using the appropriate sites to meet the needs of where the people are, whether they're living there or working there or coming to visit the city or in an entertainment venue, that all is taken into account whenever we put this new system in place. So phase one is that study. And then the next phase would be design and construction, working on getting the pieces in place and working with the contractors to put a plan for replacement so that we have coverage during the time of replacement. So the estimated project timeline would be 18 to 24 months. And I think that is certainly a reasonable estimate. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Quick one. Could you summarize the aggregate request in dollars?
So the request in dollars is for the first phase, which would be
Well,
that study.
I'm looking at four numbers on the document that was provided to us, to the board, that in the aggregate total $3,470,000.
Okay.
Could I make a point of clarification? That's for fiscal year 23. The money
Okay.
that's available and budgeted for fiscal year 24 is 4.460000 in monies.
Right. That was my confusion. And
Yeah, so I apologize. That the other money is, some of it has already been allocated and or spent. And the money total for fiscal year budget was 3.4 and change. This year is 4.46. And we're only asking for one item to be funded.
I see. I see. So what you're saying is the 3,470,000 plus one item? I'm just help me out here, just clarify.
Okay, so from an administrative point of view, last year they allocated 3.470 money. Some of that money has been utilized already. We changed software systems, so there is a little glitch in backup as to exactly if all that money has been sent. Based on the returns that we've seen for up to middle of March, we anticipate that we are getting another 4.460 million in funding that would be allocated to public safety. And we're asking for, in that particular case, for this money to then be moved to fund the sirens, to be able to move and fix the sirens with this money,
Got it.
rather than dividing it up.
All right. And just especially for the people who are new to the board, I want to clarify that that calculation of $4,460,000 is based on the ordinance that allocates a percentage of the total revenue generated to each of the categories that are approved, correct?
Under this specific sales tax, yes.
That's what I'm talking about. Yes.
Yeah, but-
Okay.
Because we have many taxes, for this specific sales tax, this would
Yeah.
be the amount that we anticipate. As of right now, that's what's come in.
Good. Okay, then I will ask if there are questions or comments from board members, either for Mr. Bradley or for Sarah.
Forgive me if my questions are ignorant, since I'm new.
No ignorant questions. You're good.
But is there like a comprehensive study of our public safety infrastructure anywhere that I can see? That kind of assesses the health and status of like these emergency response systems. whatever we have in place? Does something like that exist?
So I can respond to that one real quick. There is a capital needs summary inventory, which is on the Budget Division website under Capital Committee. If you look under the tab for Public Safety, all the items are broken down. They're broken down by police, fire, SEMA, etc. And this is one of the items that is on the request list. And those needs are also broken down in 3 categories of critical, needed, and desirable. And this particular item falls under the critical category.
And this is, all of our systems are still to support our city as it was built for our peak population. Am I understanding that correctly?
I didn't hear that. Can you repeat that one more time, please?
All of our systems are still built out to support the city as it was developed or constructed for our peak population.
No.
So how I would answer that is this. When we look at infrastructure, we look at 2 things. We look at actual size of the city, which is 62 square miles, and the area that is there, as well as we looked at the developed areas. Now, as you are aware, there are a lot of areas that are currently undeveloped, but you know, Don and his group and St. Louis Development Corporation and all of us around the table here work really hard to continue to develop. So we look at it as a continuous city unless there is some reason not to.
And then the funding requests that you have put in place, do you see them increasing incrementally over the years, like separate, exclusive of like, you know, the value of money going up or inflation? Do you see this need increasing incrementally due to this, I guess, gap between tax funding, standard public safety tax funding, and the needs that you have?
So I don't think that's a question for me. Nancy, do you want to handle that one?
Can you be more specific, Mr. Williams? Because I am not following. I have an answer to your first issue, but I want to answer the question that you're actually answering now. So, or asking now.
So the funds being requested are to support needs to the operational equipment or the infrastructure. I'm saying, do we see that increasing incrementally over the years due to the financial circumstances of our city, or are these more like unique conditions where you fix it and the problem goes away?
So,
Or will it decrease incrementally over the years?
so yes, and or both. So right now, the fund, this particular fund, which they talked about in the beginning, is to fix some specific needs. For the specific request on the sirens, there has been a lot of internal tension about whether this was the way to go or we should do something that's more 21st century. The issue that we have is that there are so many people in the city that we are trying to help in other ways so that they would have internet, cable, access to smartphones and things, that they would be able to not have to have a siren system and be able to get all of the warnings for the part of the country that we currently live in. The discussion ended with saying that at this particular time, we can't flip everybody to a more modernized system because of the structure of the city and the state of the infrastructure, which, you know, we're trying to move along. So we thought that $5 million overall to try to fix this issue would help us bridge a gap everywhere so that everyone has access to hear these sirens when they go off, and then everyone is protected at this time. Down the road, we would like to eventually not have, we would like to change what we're using this money for because we're fixing things as we go. So the other example is we took the PSAP out because we're getting that money from other places right now. But it might come back that we got some, but they need something else. Or maybe we won't need workforce development at some point. I find that hard to believe, but how we would craft would depend on how the ordinance is written and how we could move forward in the future. So it really is yes and or both, because we're trying to meet a lot of needs, but and I was not a pro siren person, which Commissioner Russell would tell you, but at the end of the day, when you look at the state of where the fiber is in the city, the digital divide and everything else, this is a way to make sure that the residents throughout the city are protected in the event of these storms. And as Rich Bradley said, today is the best day to have this conversation with you, since the last week has been rough and we're dealing with big storms. So I hope that answers the question. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
So Aaron, I would just add to that, this is an annual proceeding, and we would have the opportunity next year if there were, I'm theorizing here, but if there were a presentation that caused concern or questions, you would have the opportunity to raise your concerns. And that is a good example of why minutes are important, so that we document what was said today and the concerns that were expressed, and then we can refer to those as we go forward. Okay,
Yeah.
next.
And I'm more so just trying to find my bearings right now.
Yeah, no, and that's
Thank you.
important. And, you know, we all should wind up on the same page, and so that we can communicate effectively with one another and share each other's insights. So Nancy, there was a reference to Director Coyle presenting today. Is that?
well, Chief Coyle is the interim director of public safety. And so Commissioner Russell reports to him, and I just wanted to make sure he was here. And then if he wanted to add in on this, that would be helpful. He actually in his other life is a chief, but he knows, I always get all their titles wrong, but he actually is out of the fire department. So he might be able to add points to this on some number of levels besides just this is a good idea. So I wanted to give him the opportunity to speak to this as well, if he would like.
Is he on board?
Yes, I am.
All right,
I
good.
think Sarah-
Yeah, there you are. Good.
I think Sarah did an excellent job of talking about the importance of the sirens. And I literally support the efforts that she's doing now until we find a better way to do it. I think they're important for us when we think about emergency response. And it's an important notice to our citizens as well. So I can't add anything to her presentation because I think she did an excellent job at it.
Thank you for that. I'm glad you're on board. I have a question for you. And this, I hope you would take this in the right spirit. For me, and perhaps for others, there is what might be referred to as an elephant in the room that has not been discussed today, although there is a line item referring to it, and that is the 911 service. And the reason I refer to it as a potential elephant in the room is that it is the source of frequent concern, complaints, concerns, et cetera. And it has been a line item in previous years for this board to consider. And so my question to you is, what can you tell us about the status of the 911 system and whether there have been any enhancements or improvements that have occurred over the past year, or whether we can anticipate anything in the way of improvements in the coming year?
Okay, thank you. There have been improvements. You know, this process began with creating new dispatcher positions. As everyone knows that our numbers, staffing numbers are very low. We're trying to hire new positions in the 911 center. We had EMS dispatchers that were in a separate location, as well as fire equipment dispatchers that were in a separate location. 3 positions were created: a public safety dispatcher 1, which is a trainee, public dispatch, safety dispatcher 2, and a public safety dispatcher 3. So those positions have been created. Now, since then, and since my arrival, we have combined the 911 dispatchers with, we combined that office with the EMS dispatchers. They're currently in the same location, and we're hoping this reduces the number of calls on hold. What we have instituted is what's called a Viper system, where if you call 911 and you're on hold, you immediately get a choice of selecting if your emergency is a fire call or if your emergency is a medical call. It may say push 1 for medical. So you immediately go to an EMS dispatcher or a fire dispatcher. So that cuts down the number of calls that we have on hold. We're constantly monitoring the number of calls on hold as well to see if we can reduce it in different ways. Now, because we're still short, we anticipate this taking us a little bit longer than we would like for it to take. But we have made some great strides in getting the medical emergency calls out and the fire calls out where they're not on hold as long. And there's still a lot of work to do.
Well, I think there is a consensus on that last phrase, a lot of work to do. I mean, I bring this up because it is so important that we have an effective system, obviously, and it is so frequently a topic of discussion and consternation among a broad array of our citizens. And so I think it's important to bring that message home. And that's why I took this opportunity to bring it to your, just to bring it forefront and ask that all those who are responsible for doing anything with that system to bring your best efforts to bear on making it more efficient.
Yeah. Thank you for the question, actually. I have been talking about this for the last 40 days. We're actually trying to encourage the public to utilize other sources for non-emergencies. And I want to give an example. We have all been on the highway and noticed an accident. So when we get that call, we may get 50 or 60 calls on that one accident. We must answer each call. So that 51st or 61st call could be a different type of call. With the rollover system, if that 61st call is a medical emergency, it goes right to EMS now. So that's a big change.
Yeah.
Or it goes right to fire. But again, we're trying to educate the public on when to call 911 and when they can call a different number to get the support they need. Because if it's not an emergency, we want them to do something other than tying up the lines. So we are working on a public campaign to introduce to the public to help them understand when they should call 911 and when they should call an alternative number.
Terrific. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So back to the normal order of business. Are there any questions or comments regarding the request for an allocation of $4,460,000 in the general category of public safety infrastructure? Hearing no questions or comments, I will call for a motion. Is there a motion to approve that request?
So move.
Second, previous row.
Thank you.
I think there might be an issue if everyone is available to vote. May I call a roll very quickly for you, Chairman?
Certainly.
Aaron Williams,
Aye.
Richard Bradley,
Aye.
Michael Brown is absent, April Ford Griffin,
Aye.
Tammy Holland is absent, Tracy Johnson.
Tracy left.
Okay, so that would
I
be
think we're still,
reflected.
I think we're still good.
Yeah, and then the chair, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
All right, there you go. There are 4 in favor and none opposed.
And is that the issue you were concerned about?
Well, for previous role, because we had someone that that voted in the last, yeah.
All right, good. Thank you for that. Back to you, Nancy. Is there anything else that is on your mind that we have not covered?
I don't think so, Chairman. I think we're good with everything. We'll make sure the numbers add up and get minutes out to people, have them approved and move forward from there and let the budget director know where we're at with this.
Terrific. Thank you. Any questions or comments before we wrap up? Anything from the board? All right, hearing nothing, I will consider a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any opposition? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Good meeting, excellent meeting. Thank you for your contributions to making it so.